Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm Matthew Bailey.
I'm Jack Kim.
And I'm Will Slope, and today we'll be going over our multiple designs for expansion of Bang the Drum Brewery. Alright, and for the remainder of our presentation, we will be going over the problem background leading up to the problem statement. We will be going over the 3 different design alternatives that we came up with, a methodology for testing each of those designs, and finally a recommendation and next steps that we believe Bang the Drum should take. Alright, so now for a little background of Bang the Drum Brewery. They are the smallest brewery on the Central Coast with a humble batch size of 1.5 barrels, which equates to about 46.5 US gallons. So as you can imagine, it's a very labor-intensive process. So they only have one mash tun and brew kettle, which means that they can only brew 1.5 barrels at a time. So it's often very difficult for them to keep up with demand, especially as the growing market demands more craft brews and more experimental brews. It's hard for them to balance this craft experience of brewing to the mass production needs of the industry. And a little more background, some other groups from Cal Poly have previously gone in and made some improvements, but we believe that the capacity constraint is really what is holding Bang the Drum back.
Bang the Drum is a nano brewery with an emphasis on creativity and music. As Will said, they pride themselves on their unique assortment of craft beers. Their current small batch process is ideal for experimental brews, however it greatly limits Bang the Drum's throughput. This, combined with roughly 600 square feet of brew space, has prevented Bang the Drum from meeting the demand.
Because Bang the Drum is looking to expand, our team set out to determine which brews they might want to focus their expansion around. In order to do this, we analyzed production from last summer and then made a Pareto chart to determine which of their beers is most popular. The 2 beers we decided to focus on for our expansion project were, one, the King Mate IPA, being by far their most popular beer, in addition to the gluten-free IPA, because both of these beers have longer shelf lives as opposed to the other brews, in addition to being top sellers. The reason it's so important to focus on only a few popular, long-lasting beers is because if they do not sell, the bigger batch sizes would result in huge losses for the brewery. With that being said, Bang the Drum would also like to keep their smaller brew space because they would still like to experiment with unique batches and flavors without the risk of a huge profit loss.
With the root of Bang the Drum's problem being capacity related, we set our scope of design on expansion. Our client gave us the constraint of expanding the brew space in a retired shipping container. Beyond our client's constraint, shipping containers offer a quick, inexpensive extended space that is highly mobile.
So for our first alternative, we will look at the 5-barrel or 155-gallon design alternative. So as we migrate to SketchUp here, we can first see the current state model as it is now, with the 1.5 barrel brew kettle and brew space right here, as well as the current bar space right here. And with my proposed design, we have a 5-barrel mash tun and brew kettle located in the second story of the brew space, and as well as an auger, which would provide very easy transport of mashed grains up to the second level. And below here we have 6 jacketed fermenters, all with 5-barrel capacity. So some pros to this design are it has the largest return on investment at 821%, as well as the fastest payback period of all 3 design alternatives at just a little bit over 1 year. It would be the easiest to install of the 3 systems, seeing as it is the smallest. Some of the ergonomic features include the 2-story design, which would allow for seamless transfer of the wort from the top level straight down into the fermenters right here. In addition, like I mentioned previously, the auger, which would greatly help the workers as they would not have to lift grain into the mash tun. In addition, the relocation of the grain storage shed to a shipped container, as you can see right here, greatly reduces the distance workers must transport the grain in order to get it into the mash tun. Some cons of this design are that it has the least room for growth of the three designs, being the smallest, as well as requiring the most labor per throughput.
Okay, so the second design alternative that we came up with is a 10-barrel system, which equates to about 310 US gallons. Now, with this system, there are a couple pros and cons associated as well. The first pro is that the bright tank is double the size of the rest of the system. So as you can see, the mash tun and the brew kettle are sized at 10 barrels, and the fermenters are as well, but the bright tank actually has a capacity of 20 barrels. Now, what this does is it allows for two fermenters to be processed through the bright tank at the same time. Now, this is valuable because often the fermenters finish around the same time, and it is possible that both of the fermenters can't be processed quick enough by the bright tank. This can actually result in an entire batch being thrown out because it is sitting in the fermenter for too long. Another pro is that the milling station, shown right here in this corner, is very close to the storage rack. In the current state of their brewing process, the milling station is very far from where they store the grains, creating a lot of ergonomic difficulty for the employee to carry the heavy 50-pound grain bags all the way from the storage container to the brewing space. And finally, the last pro of this system is that the mash tun and the brew kettle were designed at an ergonomic height that is easy for both males and females to adjust and mix the grain while they're brewing and make quick adjustments without having to strain, bend over, or reach up. A couple of the cons that are associated with this design is that the fermenters are all in the back of the storage container, so it often could be hard to reach those fermenters and check the alcohol content of the fermenting beer. And also the storage shelf, as shown right here, could be difficult to refill. It might be hard to get those large amounts of grains into the storage shelf at the beginning of a week, and so that could present a challenge as well. But the day-to-day operation of the brewing system would be made easier because a milling station is located extremely close, which would allow for the grains to be poured directly into the milling machine.
The last design alternative is the 15-barrel system. This system would produce 465 gallons of beer every time they ran a batch. This design was generated in SolidWorks. It features a 15-barrel mash tun and brew kettle near the entrance of the shipping container. The beer then would be pumped into one of 6 horizontal 15-barrel fermenters that have been vertically stacked to minimize their occupational space. After that, the beer would then be pumped into a 15-barrel bright tank located conveniently right in front of the fermenters. Being the largest design, this system has a lot to offer in terms of capacity. Its biggest advantage is that it has the most room to grow. It has the capacity to brew up to 90 barrels of beer a week. Another advantage of this system is that it requires the least amount of labor hours of all 3 systems to brew 20 barrels a week. This helps reduce the direct labor cost of brewing beer. Although this system offers the most capacity, it has numerous drawbacks. The biggest drawback is its initial investment of over $325,000. This, combined with the smallest ROI and the longest payback period of all the options, make it an unpromising financial option. Furthermore, the large nature of the system greatly limits storage and movement space within the shipping container.
Here you can see the payback period for all of our 3 design alternatives. So for design alternative 1, we have it coming in at 1.09 years, 2 at 3.6 years, and design alternative 3 at a whopping 5.63 years. And some of the assumptions that we made in calculating the payback period are, one, that our demand to be 20 barrels per week. This demand was calculated with prior sales data and using a simple moving average forecast. We can also assume that more demand is out there, assuming they have a distribution model that would allow for more beer to be sold. One can see here the different return on investment values that were calculated. So we can see that the 5-barrel design alternative 1 had by far the greatest return on investment, followed by design alternative 2 and finally design alternative 3 at 78%. And some assumptions that were used in these calculations were that each pony keg sold was sold at a 25% gross margin. We also used a straight line 10-year depreciation model in calculating the return on investment for the lifetime of the equipment. And this was used instead of modified accelerated cost recovery system, otherwise known as MACRS, because straight line is the default method used to gradually reduce the carrying amount of a fixed asset over its useful life. So this was also a simpler method than MACRS, which resulted in fewer calculation errors. And we used 10 years as well as no salvage values, because those are conservative numbers that the equipment will probably last longer and have a value at the end of its life. But we just wanted to demonstrate that the profits could be much higher, and these are the numbers that we came out with.
With so many variables involved in selecting a design alternative, it is imperative that we use a methodology that encompasses all factors. Keeping financial analysis core to the methodology was crucial for this design process. With that being said, we used a cause and effect matrix that weighted our clients' desires against the process inputs involved in designing the systems. The result was a weighted system that measured the importance of each process input to design. As you can see, the most important process inputs for design were the cost of the equipment, the size of the system, and the labor hours required. It is also important to note that the cost of the equipment is by far the most important process input to expected outcome.
In conclusion, based on our methodology, we concluded that the three primary decision-making drivers are barrel size, labor hours required, and cost of equipment. Based on these factors, we recommend Bang the Drum move forward with the 5-barrel system, as it is the most economically justified option. Thanks for listening, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below.